I don't stand side by side with nobody till I bleed with them first.
What did we just see? You probably think this world is a dream come true.
When I step into this ring, yeah, bro, I am addicted.
Don't sleep on Luca!
Maybe tomorrow we'll all wear 42.
If you fight for your dreams will fight for you!
Let me start this video off by stating Stardom is not a perfect wrestling promotion. There are a lot of things that they do that confuse the fans just as much as any other promotion. All-Star Dream Queendom happened about 2 to 3 months ago, and so much is already different from that historic event. The story of Mina Shirakawa finally becoming white belt champion ended after one title defense in 34 days. Restart winning the trios titles ended after 34 days and no title defenses. Again, it's not perfect, but that doesn't stop the promotion from putting on some of the best wrestling and simple stories to date. One of the simplest stories Stardom told was around this same time last year. At that time, Donna Del Mundo member Natsupoi was engaged in a feud with Cosmic Angels leader Tam Nakano. The two faced off in an emotional cage match and followed it up with a brutal battle in the following weeks. Though Natsupoi lost the cage match, she won the following match. She was very emotional afterwards and was embraced by her leader Julia. The simple story being told was that she proved to be on that upper echelon level in Stardom. However, she comes to realize that it was Tam who brought that fight out of her. Tam was the one that pushed her to that next level through their battles. So, when the two factions are facing off in a match, Natsupoi does the unthinkable. She super kicks her leader. In the post-match, she explains to Julia and the rest of her faction members that she realized the potential she has within her, but she isn't going to reach that potential in Donna Del Mundo. In Donna Del Mundo, she feels more like a pet, like she's not equal to her fellow members. So she leaves her faction for the one they had literally been feuding with. She joins Cosmic Angels and cements herself as Tam's right hand. The reason I bring this story up is because last year, this exact story and post-match sequence was what compelled me to make a video about it on my old sports podcast. And about a year later, Stardom has done it once again. Saya Kamitani and Utami Hayashishita are two wrestlers who joined Stardom 1 year apart from each other. Utami joined in August of 2018 and Saya joined in August of 2019. The two are a part of one of Stardom's prominent factions, Queen's Quest. Hayashishita joined a couple months after her debut and became leader in 2022. Kamitani would join the faction in 2020, and the story of it all ties into today's overall story. See, when Saya first joined Stardom, she was the oddity of not belonging to a faction for quite some time. She floated around teaming with different people and groups, but she never belonged to a faction. That was until the beginning of 2020. On February 16, 2020, Saya Kamitani faced off against Utami Hayashishita in a match for Stardom's Future of Stardom Championship. Kamitani would go on to lose the match, but afterwards was invited to join Queen's Quest by Hayashishita. And it didn't take long for the two to make an impact together. The two would later win the tag titles, and upon entering Stardom's annual tag team tournament, the two would dub themselves as Aphrodite. This name will come into play later. Towards the end of 2020, Utami Hayashishita would beat Mayu Iwatani for Stardom's top prize, the World of Stardom Championship, otherwise known as the Red Belt. Hayashishita would reign as champion for 409 days, and it's the end of the reign that really sparks today's story. At Stardom's Dream Queendom event on December 29, 2021, Hayashishita would lose the title to Shuri. Right before her match, Kamitani would defeat Tam Nakano for the Wonder of Stardom Championship. So, heading into the new year, Kamitani was champion and Hayashishita was not. During Hayashishita's red belt reign, she had a match with Kamitani and it ended with Hayashishita's third defense of the title. So similarly, Hayashishita would come to challenge her fellow faction member to a match and it would result in Kamitani's third defense. From here on out, the two would have very different years. Kamitani would reign with her title for 480 days, second longest reign in that title's history, and recorded the most defenses at 15. Hayashishita, on the other hand, had what many would call a lackluster year. She still maintained her winning ways, but Stardom definitely struggled to give her something of substance this year. And many of her notable moments and matches usually saw her on the losing end. She lost to Kamitani in a match for the white belt. She failed to win the trios titles. She went out in the first round of the Cinderella tournament after going to a time limit draw with Tam Nakano. She recruited rookie Mio Amazaki to Queen's Quest, and then the two lost to Kairi and Tam Nakano in tag action. Queen's Quest lost the cage match to Stars. She came in 6th in her block for Stardom's 5-star Grand Prix tournament. She fell to Mayu Iwatani in the semi-finals of the inaugural IWGP Women's Championship tournament. And to end it off, was unsuccessful in regaining her World of Stardom Championship from Shuri. The only thing left was the Tag League. Aphrodite makes their return, and they actually saw great success, so much so that they won their block and advanced to the finals. However, that's where the good ends, as she and Kamitani fell to the team of Nane Takahashi and Yu. At the year-end event, she would have a match with Kairi that ended in a time limit draw. On the other side of the coin, there was Kamitani retaining her title again and heading into the new year as champion. And things just didn't change. Haya Shishida, Kamitani, and Azumi would enter the trio tournament and again come up short, finishing 3rd in their block. Haya Shishida was out in the first round of the Cinderella tournament again due to another time limit draw. Queen's Quest was unsuccessful in challenging for the trios titles again. In April, Kamitani's legendary reign would come to an end, and she would rejoin Queen's Quest in tag and trios action. In one of these matches, Queen's Quest would lose in quick fashion, and Haya Shishida showed her frustration with Queen's Quest's losing ways. However, Azumi and Kamitani were just coming off of long reigns as champions. It's here that the fans began to ask, Queen's Quest has been losing, but is she angry with them or herself? Well, things all came to a head on May 4th. Aphrodite would lose a tag match to Julia and Maika of Donna Del Mundo. After the match, Haya Shishida and Kamitani are interviewed backstage, and during the promo, Kamitani seems to say something that ticks off Haya Shishida. Essentially, Haya Shishida felt that Kamitani was implying that she was the cause of all their losses. She tosses the ice pack in Kamitani's face, and Kamitani just simply walks off, annoyed. Things are not fine from this point on. In one match, the two are fighting over who gets the pinfall. In another match, Haya Shishida is attacking her. As Kamitani puts it, they have no chemistry anymore, and she feels like she is having to win these matches alone. Shortly after this, Queen's Quest becomes engaged in a feud with Stardom's resident heel faction, Oedo Tai. Now with this, there is a lot of history here. Oedo Tai member Momo Watanabe was the former leader of Queen's Quest. She was the first leader to betray her own faction. Along with this, Oedo Tai member Saki Kashima was the one who finally ended Azumi's long-acclaimed high-speed title reign. And finally, the feud between the two leaders. Oedo Tai leader Natsuko Tora previously faced off against Haya Shishida during the latter's red belt reign. The match took place in 2021, and in the match, Tora would unfortunately suffer an injury that would keep her out for almost a year. To make it up to her, Haya Shishida promised her a match for the title when she came back. However, as we know, Haya Shishida would lose the title to Shuri by year's end, and when Tora made her return in 2022, the first person she went after was Haya Shishida. Now, Haya Shishida would go on to win their one-on-one match, but that doesn't mean Tora moved on. That takes us back to the present where the two factions are feuding and it all revolves around Haya Shishida. There is clearly something wrong with the faction and all fingers point to their leader. As we saw with Watanabe, Oedo Tai is not opposed to poaching members for their own benefit. And the beauty of this story as it played out was that it could be anybody. Kamitani could leave after the divide that has developed between her and Haya Shishida. Haya Shishida could leave and blame her faction for her losing ways since losing the red belt. And then the wild cards of the rest of the Queen's Quest members such as Azumi, Lady C, Miyu Amazaki, and Hina all being available options. This all leads to a faction war, and just like last year, Queen's Quest finds themselves locked in a cage. Unlike last year, where Stars and Queen's Quest faced off in a cage match that had the comedic element of half the participants being afraid of heights, the match between Oedo Tai and Queen's Quest is all business. Going into the match, they upped the stakes even more by adding weapons. The rules for this cage match are simple. Climb the cage to escape. Whoever is the last one in the cage has to leave their faction. The key component of this match is Utami Hayashishita. Her leadership has been put into question for the entirety of this build and since last year overall. How will she respond to her critics and doubters? Well, she responds beautifully. The match begins and it's an all-out brawl. The two factions batter each other and immediately start using the cage to their advantage. Lady C and Kamatani work together to throw Starlight Kid into the cage wall. We then see a fun spot where all 6 members of Queen's Quest land drop kicks on Watanabe. It doesn't take long for Oedo Tai to start the weapons warfare as they bring out a table. Hayashishita and Kamatani try to help, but Lady C is hit with a huge splash through the table. We then get a fun spot where the twins Hina for Queen's Quest and Rina for Oedo Tai take turns judo tossing their opponents before facing off against each other. We then get the factions trading offense before we see both the twins escape. Some context for this, the twins are both 16, so that's why their time in this match is rather short. They still get their moments, but they're the first out to ensure their safety. Back in the ring, Azumi and Starlight Kid continue to be eternal foes and face off in a high-speed sequence. Azumi is the first of Queen's Quest to use a weapon as she strikes Kid in the face with the Oedo Tai briefcase, but she soon eats a chair to the face by Kid. Kid attempts to Irish whip Azumi into Hayashishita, but instead, Hayashishita uses the momentum to launch Azumi onto the cage wall. As Azumi tries to escape, Hayashishita holds Kid and the other Oedo Tai members at bay. It's not enough though, as Kid and Azumi fight on the cage wall, but neither escapes. We see a great spot with Lady C hitting a huge chokeslam on Kid. This sets up a huge foot stomp from the top of the cage by Azumi. You would think that hinders her, but Azumi just pops right up and uses the adrenaline to rush and climb out the cage before anybody can stop her. We then get a beautiful spot where Hayashishita gets Tora in a chokehold. Kamatani and Lady see this and follow suit, which allows Amazaki to escape thanks to her fellow stablemates. We get a brutal spot where Watanabe hits the remaining Queen's Quest members with a bat, with Hayashishita getting the worst of it as Watanabe and Tora both hit her with bats. She then eats a mean spinebuster onto a chair as well. This allows Watanabe to escape, and to make things less confusing, that leaves Kamatani, Lady C, and Hayashishita for Queen's Quest, and Tora, Kid, Kashima, and Ruaka for Oedo Tai. We see a sick spot where Kid nails Lady with a huge chair shot to the head and then follows it up with a huge moonsault off the top of the cage. And just like Azumi, she pops up and escapes right after. The next escape we see is an amazing one. Lady C grabs Ruaka and Tora and drops both of them on a ladder. However, when she does this, she also lands and thus hurts her back. Now, Hayashishita could have easily used this opportunity to escape, but instead, she once again demonstrates her leadership. She helps Lady up, and as she climbs the wall, she's on the shoulders of her leader so that the escape is much easier for her and her back. She put her faction before herself. This, of course, leaves her and Kamatani as the remaining members. They have struggled so much coming into this match. Can they put it all behind them? Well, it doesn't look like it. Ruaka tries to hit Kamatani over the head with a briefcase, but Hayashishita stops her. All is well, right? Well, she tries to hit Ruaka with that briefcase, but she moves out the way, and Hayashishita ends up hitting Kamatani with the case. This leads to Ruaka and Kashima attempting to escape. Ruaka escapes, but Azumi sprays Kashima with a fire extinguisher from the outside to stop her. Hayashishita hits a huge air raid crash to Kashima from the second rope. Hayashishita and Kamatani work together to take out Tora, and then Hayashishita uses the ladder to help Kamatani escape. Once again, she put her faction before herself. But is that going to cost her? She is now left with a 2-on-1 disadvantage. Her and Tora go back and forth trading blows. Tora then hits Hayashishita with a fist wrapped in a chain and then proceeds to hit a Death Valley driver onto the chairs. Tora tries to escape, but Hayashishita hits a huge suplex to her off the cage wall. The two later find themselves battling atop the cage. Tora knocks her off the cage after striking her with a kendo stick. With the assistance of Kashima, Tora hits a huge senton off the top of the cage and then escapes. All that is left is Kashima and Hayashishita. By this point, Hayashishita is a bloody mess, but that doesn't stop her from fighting. She hits a huge German suplex on Kashima and then a powerbomb. As she is struggling to get to her feet, you see her faction members cheering her on. but the camera mainly focuses on Kamitani calling out to her, almost pleading with her to get up. Hayashishita begins to climb the cage wall, but Watanabe attempts to stop her. Kamitani ascends as well to stop her, and this is when we reach the climax of this match and Aphrodite's story as a whole. As Kamitani gets to the top to assist Hayashishita, Watanabe hands her a bat. Earlier in the build, when the stipulation was first proposed, Watanabe handed Kamitani the bat. She ended up giving it back, and Oedo Tai used it to take out Hayashishita. Kamitani didn't even bother to look back as she walked out, and Hayashishita herself left that day alone without a single faction member by her side. And so here we are again. We find ourselves in a familiar situation. Kamitani just stares at the bat. She grabs it and stares at it before facing Hayashishita. She thinks about all that has happened leading up to this point. The divide between her and her partner has grown so much. When they lose, they no longer lose together. Instead, they just look to blame each other. She looks at her partner and is overwhelmed with anger, confusion, anxiety, and all the emotions in the world. But in the end, she is consumed by one emotion and does the unthinkable. The Tag Team Championships in Stardom are called the Goddesses of Stardom titles. When Hayashishita and Kamitani won those titles in 2020, they didn't have a name for themselves. It wasn't until that year's Tag League tournament that they dubbed themselves Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love. And love is the only explanation for Kamitani's actions. She could have easily chosen to betray her leader. She could have easily chosen to take out all her frustrations on her leader with that bat. And really, she did. It's just Hayashishita wasn't the target. She nails Watanabe with that bat and extends her hand out to her leader. And it is through this that her leader finally learns what it means to love and to lead. As leader, Hayashishita was overwhelmed with her duties. As a leader, she is the example. She is who her members look to for inspiration, for guidance, for help. Throughout this match, Hayashishita was helping her members left and right. Even if it meant she was the last in the cage, all she cared about was getting them out. It isn't until the end that she finally learns she isn't invincible. Blood covers her face and she realizes that she is human. Her accepting Kamitani's help shows that she finally realized not only that she can't do everything on her own, but she isn't expected to. She has a whole faction that loves her. She has a tag partner who has loved her through her peaks and valleys as a performer. Even when it got tough, even when she had every right to turn on her leader, Kamitani chose what the two of them have always symbolized as a team: love. In the post-match, all of Queen's Quest get in the ring and Hayashishita gets on the mic. The first thing she does is show her gratitude to all of Queen's Quest. She says it is thanks to everyone's efforts that they leave today without losing anyone. Before, she blamed them for all the losing, but now she has accepted that no matter how much one person contributes, they win and lose together as a faction. We then see Hayashishita start to crawl over to Kamitani. While it is likely due to exhaustion, it adds to the story that when she does this, she has her head down, almost as if she's ashamed to face her partner, perhaps ridden with guilt that after how she has treated her recently, Kamitani still chose to help and save her. She finally does look at Kamitani and tells her that she is sorry for everything. She hands the mic to Kamitani, and Kamitani tells her, "I'm usually too embarrassed to say this, but I respect you. I love you. Please let me continue to be by your side." We see Hayashishita say yes before welcoming Kamitani into a hug, which takes her down to the mat. To make sure they know it extends to them as well, Hayashishita calls for her other members to join in as well, and they all happily oblige. Hayashishita closes on the mic and the message is clear. They love their leader and she loves them. They believe in their leader and now finally she believes in them. With their support, she wants to take them to the top of Stardom. As it currently stands, this is my match of the year. Does it match the in-ring quality of Omega vs. Ospreay, Azumi vs. Mei Seira, Kamitani vs. Hazuki, or Commander vs. Vikingo? Don't get me wrong, it's a great match, but I think most would watch this match and say no. But does the overall story and emotion demonstrated in this match exceed anything I have seen so far this year? My answer is yes, and I hope you all can come to understand something. Wrestling is subjective. Right now, everybody is clamoring for the recent Omega vs. Ospreay rematch at Forbidden Door. I have no doubt in my mind it will top many year-end lists and likely make mine as well. But we all have our biases. We all have our favorites in this world, and that means that many times we become invested in the stories being told by our favorite characters. When I first learned about Stardom, it was because of Hana Kimura. But when I began to fully watch it and keep up with it, Utami Hayashishida and Queen's Quest were what got me. It was the presentation of Queen's Quest, the intricate robes, the unique masks, each faction member essentially having an assigned color, the giant flag they would carry, and of course, the way the members carried themselves, their music, the lighting, their attires, all of it pulled me in and said that this is the faction that I love. Seeing Utami, Saya, and Azumi all as champions, the aura they emitted, the way they presented themselves, it was so beautiful and just everything that I love about wrestling. They have been my favorites since. So of course, when there is an emotional story and match built around the potential fall of the faction/faction leader, I'm going to care more about it than any other match. I'm going to be more invested than any other match this year. The only two matches that come anywhere close to this was Danielson vs. MJF and Zayn vs. Reigns. In both matches, I ended up getting the unsatisfactory ending of seeing my favorites fail to win the big one, thus hurting my view of the overall match. In this match, I got the fairy tale ending of Queen's Quest remaining whole, and Saya Kamitani and Utami Hayashishida demonstrating what it means to love. Unless Stardom decides they want to break my heart, it is really only up from here for these 6 women.